Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can all hear me. Good evening to all of you here in Brussels, of course. Welcome to the Press Club, but also a warm welcome to all of you, wherever you are and from wherever you are watching us right now. And yeah, it's already the second event on Ethiopia, Ethiopian conflict, the voice of the Amhara that we're organizing here in the Brussels Press Club. Why are we doing a follow-up event? We have to say that our first event was at the 16th of June at the very same place here, but a lot of things happened in the meantime. There was, of course, the elections in Ethiopia at the 21st of June. Then the announcement who won was at the 10th of July. And finally, exactly 1 week ago, President Abiy was confirmed for another period of 5 years as your president. So a lot of things happened, and we would like to know what is the situation right now, what happened. And as we can see, a lot of things did not much improve on the ground. There is still a lot of conflict going on, a lot of things which are not really the way we want them to be. And this is why we're organizing this year. My name is Monica Högen. I'm happy to moderate this event for you. And before we start with our experts here, who know the situation much better, I have a few housekeeping remarks to make. First of all, those of you who are in Brussels, please remember, don't forget to put your phone back on again when you leave the room. So that's always helpful. And for those of you behind the screens, please realize that you can already participate a little bit via the chat. Later on, before the discussion, you can also participate more actively, but I will explain that later on. So that's for now. As I said, yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and sometimes it feels like we here in the West, in Brussels, the capital of the European Union, we're not so much aware of what is going on. We hear a lot about the Tigray conflict, but we don't hear so much about other conflicts, other things going on the ground. And so there is obviously a need for more information and a need for new initiatives. And so on behalf of the organizers here, I would like to first welcome our first guest, Tamar Robesha. Very much welcome. So maybe an applause for all of us to motivate us a little bit to start that here. And you founded the initiative against impunity in Ethiopia. You yourself, you're an electrical engineer. You were a specialist in telecom and renewable energies. You're based in Germany for quite a long time, but now you're also very much involved in trying to improve the situation in your country. And your initiative wants to advocate for accountability and justice in Ethiopia, which is of course a difficult thing to do. So maybe you could first explain us a little bit what your initiative is about and give us a first introduction into our topic tonight. You just have to, may I help you somewhere? I think it's on, is it on? Yeah, it's on, okay.
And what triggered us to create this initiative? It was the ongoing massacre of the Amhara people in different parts of the region, and also the invasion of TPLF, the Amhara region. And due to this, there has been always an impunity in Ethiopia. And we are now refusing impunity, and we would like to do something in cooperation with some others. So that is how we initiated the initiative. It is called Initiative Against Impunity in Ethiopia. So what is our goal? Our goal is to actively participate in stopping the massacre of Amharas, so that the Amharas experience justice in all regions of Ethiopia. And for that, we would like to work with as many organizations, stakeholders as possible, who are ready genuinely to support us to do their part, or to do their part in this struggle. And that is in short what we are intending to do. Thank you, Monica.
Thanks very much, Tamar. Do you also would like to share a little bit, just because you still have 1 or 2 minutes? I was not. I'm surprised because I always tell people to limit their time, and then it's, yeah, very good. Would you like to share with us a little bit what is the situation, the current situation at the moment? As I mentioned, the elections earlier on. Did that have any effect on what is going on the ground and what you want to do?
Well, the election is already passed, as you said, and the situation is now very, very complicated and at the same time very dangerous, particularly for the Amhara people, because in the Oromia region, in Benishangul region, Amharas are being killed on a daily basis. And from the north, TPLF has already invaded the Amhara region, about 700 or 600, 700 kilometers in the Amhara region. And they kill even the animals, the TPLF. They kill even the animals and so on. And they are doing everything they can do, they are able to do. So what is astonishing in this situation is that TPLF is invading, and the West is supporting with foods and materials. Of course, in principle, we support that. But what we miss is the West doesn't utter any word when it comes to the plight of the Amharas. So one cannot avoid thinking of the West just in one direction and say, okay, we want to support Tigray, the others, they don't care. So that is something which is very worth to think about, because I don't think it is in the interests of the West and US in particular to be one-sided and say the others, they just say nothing at all when it comes to the plight of the Amharas. I said, because in the Amhara region now, due to the war, there are about 1.2 million evictions, IDPs, and thousands of innocent people are being killed, and nothing in the West has been said and is being said. And it would have been more than ethical to say to give this information to the public.
Yeah, thank you, Tamar. These are, of course, strong accusations, but they are still in line with what our next presenter says. He said recently in one of his reports, the UN looks the other way when it comes to human rights abuses of the Amharas. And with these words, I would like to introduce Jeff Pierce. I hope we are connected to him. It's a historian, author, and journalist who recently went to the region and did a lot of reports there. And as I just said, your critical reports caused a lot of reactions. And I think you're very much in line and with what Tamar just said. Before you tell us a little about your findings, I would like to know a little bit about yourself and why is it that you are so much interested in Ethiopia? Why Ethiopia? What is it that brought you there in the first place? We cannot hear you. Maybe you're muted. You are still muted, I'm sorry. He's not? So then it's our problem.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Just a minute, we're trying to
You should be.
connect to your sound.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Hopefully you're hearing me. In answer to your question, in terms of why I'm so interested in Ethiopia, I get asked that a lot, but the thing is, my answer is a stock reply. Who do I have to be, and why shouldn't I be interested in Ethiopia? Ethiopia is endlessly fascinating. It has a rich history. It has just amazing culture. It has so much to offer, and now this country is at risk. So in short, that's my response. Hello?
Yeah. Well, but it was always something that you, or is it a recent interest that you have, or you're following up on the situation for a long time already?
Well, first of all, no. I wrote a book called Prevail, which many Ethiopians are familiar with, which is about the Italian-Ethiopian War. I have a new book about Africa coming out next year. But basically, I became interested in this because of the morality of it. The Ethiopian people are getting maligned. They're getting slandered. Even their history is being attacked by a terrorist organization. And this helps no one. And the facts are being misrepresented. And they deserve better. They damn well deserve better. And there should be more of us speaking up. I can count off on, and still have fingers left over, on two hands, a number of actual Caucasian allies who are working hard on this. Never mind the fact that we have some of the diaspora community who are working around the clock to help. We need more. So this is a deserving cause. As it's not about me, it's about the fact of what's right.
So as I said earlier on, you said the UN turns a blind eye on human rights abuses when it's not, when it's committed by people from Tigray, when it's committed against Amhara. Why do you think is that, and what is do you have evidence for this?
Yes, I do have evidence. I have evidence right from a source who passed along to me a internal email, which literally says, and it's in my article if one wants to go up. I can read it off. Let me find the passage. The situation across Shira feels a bit tense as TF military recruitment campaign continues and intensifies for over a week now. Unconfirmed reports indicate that mandatory recruitment, at least one person per family, have been ongoing in the past few days, coinciding with the increasing tensions, challenges, blah, blah, blah. And as I pointed out in my article, why is it that this was not included in the situation report? Why are certain facts, like the fact that they're firing off weapons, putting people at risk, not in the situation report? And what the hell is the UN doing about it? Just to use my time effectively, let's assume that many of the people who are watching this are fairly informed. We had Guterres tweet out and say, to the effect of, let's see if I can find it because I pulled it up. Conspiracy theories, misinformation, disinformation, and lies are thriving in our broken information ecosystem. We must make lying wrong again. Yeah, to which I say you first, because I've had multiple sources tell me about the shenanigans going on at the UN. I have the document now. I will have more documents coming. So let's start first with your organization, Mr. Guterres. From the very beginning, this conflict has been misrepresented. I can pull out various stories where they said, Abiy claims that the Northern Command was attacked first. It's not a claim, it's a fact. We have the evidence in terms of a TPLF official confessing to it on Tigrayan television. It's right there. We know that the Axum massacre story was misrepresented because I have video of people walking around on the very day that there was supposed to be blood in the streets. We know that the Maikadra massacre is being misrepresented because I was there. I actually had a team interview the survivors and witnesses. And these facts are conveniently neglected. Mark Lowcock decides to misrepresent them in a column. On the very night that his column is published, he's on PBS spinning this nonsense. Now, the fact of the matter is we can go over all the evidence and again, but we've got to move on to actual action. And this is where we have to stop being polite because the sovereignty of the country is at stake. It is high time that the journalists, many of whom are whites, and why we need Declan Walsh, Tom Gardner, Will Brown, Anna Kara, all these Caucasian people from the West to interpret Africa for us, one wonders. But it's about high time to make their lives uncomfortable because they're not accountable to the people they're reporting on. I'm not talking about advocating violence. I'm not talking about advocating intimidation. I'm saying if you rent to, what's his name? Robbie Corey Boulay in Addis, evict him. You don't have to rent to this guy. Here's a story from the 8th. Ethiopia forces strike. Tigray rebels in massive move. And the story from his tweet says Ethiopian government troops are waging air and ground strikes in northern Amhara in what the TPLF described as a massive move. His story looks entirely at this development through TPLF eyes. There is no.
May I just interrupt you for a minute because we might not know all those journalists that you are quoting, but of course it's very passionate. Yeah, of course, but but I would like to. I mean, we understand that you're very passionate about that, and I think it's a good thing that the way you're supporting our approach here. But just one question that you raised earlier on, your own question. Did you find an answer to that? You said, why the hell the UN is doing that? Did you find an answer to that question?
Yes, because it serves their interest to cooperate with a terrorist organization. It's easier to cooperate with them. We know that there are sympathizers working within these UN agencies. This comes in the wake of the debacle over this so-called leaked audio, which is not a leaked audio. It was stolen from me. It was stolen from my digital recorder at the airport. This is my first public appearance since that whole scandal. And the fact of the matter is you have a Western journalist yucking it up with two of the most virulent TPLF trolls on Twitter and says it's laughable, to which I would like to say, why would I risk what you folks consider a joke as a reputation to burn my sources and make it so that I would not be able to interview, so that nobody else would ever want to trust me again? Why would I do that? So the audio was stolen. It was taken from me, but the sources on it pointed the finger at one of the people who was later kicked out of the country. Let's ask Mr. Guterres about his conduct. Let's ask about the document that I have. Let's ask about the sources' accounts of when UN senior officials were harassing Ethiopian workers and were interfering with the national exams in Mekelle. Can we talk about that? But more importantly, let's get to the action. I think these people's lives should be made uncomfortable. They've gone after Ethiopian Airlines, and quite frankly, what they forget is Ethiopian Airlines probably has a no-fly list like other carriers. Frankly, it's about high time that some of these propagandists disguised as journalists get put on a no-fly list and are not able to go on the routes to other parts of Africa for which Ethiopia Airlines serves. Go find another airline to do that. Use it.
Okay, thank you. That's some clear recommendations for action. But before we go to action, maybe we stick a little bit to analysis. And I would like to switch to another speaker. Having heard all that, I would like to switch. No, we will bring you back. Don't worry, we'll bring you back later on in discussion. But I would like to switch to Senai, who is also very much into the topic of the topic of disinformation. You also say that most of the time now the victims are blamed, and we should also get away from that. First of all, I want to present you. You're an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Minnesota in the US, and you're a specialist in disaster risk modeling, whether it's man-made or natural disaster. and you're the president of the Genocide Prevention in Ethiopia Association. So having heard what Jeff just told us, what is your opinion on that? Would you support him in these findings? Do you have evidence that is supporting this, or what is your analysis on that?
Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you for having me and for holding this program. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I agree with Jeff. There has been a rampant disinformation, misattribution of evidences, in general, deliberate misusing of data ever since this conflict started in northern Ethiopia, but also in general, ever since TPLF and with its coalition took over power in Ethiopia, because we know that the ethnic federalism system was only imposed by only a few players over Ethiopians, specifically Amharas and a few other groups were not even on the table when this system was imposed. But lately, the past 3 years, and especially since COVID lockdown started, things got a lot worse because the problem went beyond even the Ethiopian borders. Unfortunately, international journalists actually started taking repetition as validation, started fishing for information on Twitter, on different social media, and literally taking it as truth just because it's repeated enough. We've seen there has been a Harvard study showing that there is rampant misinformation surrounding, almost all sides of the groups, but basically a lot of use of kind of bots on the TPLF side when things are repeated using bot accounts. I mean, generally, this is definitely not a topic to cover in 5 minutes. However, I'll do my best to give you major highlights. So when we talk about genocide, most people use the 10-point classification as a guideline for identifying genocide, or that was kind of made popular by the Genocide Watch organization, or the 5-point description that the UN uses to describe the elements of this genocide crime. I personally began to wonder, however, with the advent of digital technology that allows effective data falsification, that blaming the victims should also be included as a hallmark of genocide itself. Were more effective ways of hiding the truth than making the, there are no ways of making, effective ways of hiding genocide than the victims itself appear to be the killer. And this has happened against Amharas countless times. As for, Jeff highlighted, and we have also covered this in the prequel of today's program, which we had early in the summer, Amharas and other selectively targeted identities were under attack in Ethiopia just for their ethnic identity ever since the ethnic federalism system was imposed in Ethiopia. That is in 1991 and onwards. But in the past, the attacks were simply hidden, as there is always a state-sponsored component to the attacks. And especially because Amharas were not politically organized along ethnic lines, not many really advocates raised awareness about it. But lately, when the change and, when that changed and Amhara advocacy groups started reporting on atrocities, the tactic to keep the genocide silent evolved into blaming the victim. So unfortunately, this is not limited to just one group in Ethiopia, or not even within the borders of Ethiopia. Just to give you an example, on March 2nd, 2021, the VOA, that is Voice of America itself, to our shock, while reporting on an alleged massacre in Aksum, Tigray, where Amhara forces were not even on location, misused a footage from the burial ceremony of 1,600 Amharas that were murdered by TPLF in Maikadra, as if it is a footage corresponding to the news they were covering about Aksum. Now, you might think this is a simple mistake, but the Maikadra attack, as just Jeff mentioned earlier, happened on November 9th, 2020, just 5 days after the war started. And there is a video evidence that VOA misattributed the footage. Later, they removed the online video from their YouTube account, but they refused. So they removed it as after an outroar, but they refused to issue a correction to their live TV audience. So this only shows that it was a deliberate use. This happened even if the TPLF leader, Dr. Debretsion himself, reported on his November 14th, that's 5 days after the massacre, on his war address, he denied carrying it out, but he admitted that the victims were Amhara. He himself, no human rights organization, no major media that has been reporting on Ethiopian issue, and especially about the conflict in Tigray, ever mentioned that video. Imagine, this is from the horse's mouth. This is the TPLF leader saying the victims are Amhara. Nobody ever mentioned that, and we have the video. On one of the recent statements, I'm wrapping up, the European Union issued a statement as if the victims from the same event, Maikadra, were Tigrayan, despite the fact that plenty of international journalists and human rights organizations of both non-Ethiopian and Ethiopian origin have reported on the issue. Just to add on this, multiple pictures of Amhara genocide from Wallagga, Metekel, Shawa, the southern region have been used to raise awareness as if being misused, as if it happened elsewhere. And we're not saying crimes should not be reported, whether it's in Tigray, in Oromo region, in Amhara, in southern region. We have an ethnic system with a lot of ethnic problems and strife, and every single individual needs to get justice, especially if they're targeted because of their ethnicity, because you can't do nothing about it. This is something you're born into. But we think it's a trifecta of injustice, to be attacked, to be murdered, and your pictures to be used as if the victims are others and you are the killer. And there are plenty of examples of this. The use of pictures of different events is so rampant that it is important to geolocate every evidence that is reported as an evidence of genocide. It doesn't matter for which side, but everything has to be in detail, has to be looked at, because the more you misuse pictures, the more that these evidences cannot be used to give justice to the real victims. Just to wrap up, while the war has shifted on Amhara and Afar regions since the June 2021, since the unilateral ceasefire has been issued by the government, international media, I'm wrapping up, still reports the war as if it happens in Tigray. They call it war in Tigray. This is as Amhara civilians are stranded with no food, no amenities, where TPLF is forced conscripting children to use as human shield, where rape and gang rape is widespread all over the TPLF occupied territories of Amhara regions. More than anything, the complete indifference to the Amharas that are being targeted still both at the war front and the rest of the country is yet the major assault on the survival of these targeted people. It is simply lying by omission. Like right this moment, over 40,000 Amharas are stranded in a small district in Wallagga Oromo region. It's a place called Kirumu. They have been sending out harrowing voice messages for help. Rather than deploying help, regional government forces actually left the area. So right now, right groups are actually just demanding, forget about their rights to live anywhere in the country, but just allow the mass exodus, just let them live alive. So this is how much the problem has evolved from last time that we had that program. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to highlight this problem.
Thank you, Senat. And yeah, please. And I'm sure there are much more things to say about that and much more details, but we will come back to that later, and also to the question what we can do about it. But before we do that, I would like to switch to next panelist, which is Robel Alemu. Hope you're also connected and we can reach out to you. Yes, here you are. We cannot, I don't know if you have a little bit more light in front of you, Robel, so that we could see your face a bit better. It's a bit, if you have like a lamp or something in front of you. If not, we go ahead like that. Robel Alemu, you are a student of medical science at the University of Toronto. But you're also a human rights advocate, and you document human rights violations against the Amhara people, and you also with the Amhara Association of America. We just heard from Senai a few things which are really, really horrible to listen to, and your main aspect is the lack of accountability. So meaning that all those things that you just said and other things, the mass murders and all those things, nobody's held accountable for that. Can you tell us a little bit about your findings and how come that there is no justice, and yeah, maybe you also have some ideas what could be done to change the situation.
Thank you so much for having me. I work closely with Dr. Sen Knight as part of genocide prevention in Ethiopia, in addition to AAA. So I'd be happy to comment a little bit. Just to preface what I'm going to say, 5 minutes is very difficult to cover such a large topic, but I'll just try and give a little bit of an overview, and I hope to maybe get into some of the more nuances in our further discussion later. It should be noted when addressing human rights abuses against the Amhara people, we can actually go back many decades to unpack the earliest crimes and the factors that have led to the genocide that we have seen historically, but currently at present as well. In order to contextualize current events, I think it's important to make a distinction between the last 3 years under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his Prosperity Party, and then the preceding coalition called the EPRDF, which was led by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. The TPLF was originally a separatist group, but in their 1976 manifesto, they named the Amhara people as their eternal enemies. When they came to power in the early 90s, they changed the administrative boundaries of the country by ethnic lines, expanded their home region of Tigray by annexing historic majority Amhara lands of Walqait and Raya, and they did the same along other inter-regional border areas, which led to systematic ethnic cleansing, and this was effectively legalized with the implementation of a racist constitutional order, which introduced a system of apartheid. The TPLF went on to govern the country for some 27 years between 91 and 2018, which was characterized by many crimes, including genocide against the Amhara, the Oromo, the Somali, the Gambela, and other groups as well. However, it should be noted that after Prime Minister Abiy and his party came to power in 2018, the genocidal massacres actually did not stop, but alarmingly increased in frequency. The intensified genocide over the past 3 years has taken place across the country, targeting Amhara civilians and other ethnic minorities by violent armed groups, including the TPLF, the Oromo Liberation Front, or OLF Shenne, or otherwise known as the Oromo Liberation Army, or OLA, the Gumuz Liberation Front, and the Kimant Liberation Front. It should be noted, all of these groups have close ties with the TPLF, who have readily provided financial, logistical, and other forms of support. And at times, other ethnic minorities are targeted as well. But in addition, some of these groups have been aided by regional officials, especially in the Oromia and Benishangul Gumuz regions, which have been found to be the most hostile regions for ethnic Amharas in Ethiopia. But truth be told, as I said before, we don't have sufficient time to review the long list of massacres, but it's important to note that much of this killing actually took place before the current war in northern Ethiopia, and armed groups have been targeting civilian populations with impunity outside of an actual war scenario. So, for example, earlier this year, the Amhara Association of America, or AAA, released a quarterly report entitled Untold Massacres Against Ethnic Amharas in Ethiopia, and they detailed just the atrocities between January and March of 2021. So this does not even go into 2020, 2019, and late 2018. So the AAA actually estimated that since July 2020, more than 1,700 Amharas had been killed and 800,000 were displaced from these ethnically targeted massacres. But what is alarming is that this figure is taken prior to the invasion into Amhara and Afar earlier this summer, and investigative reporting and recently some coverage from international media has highlighted the group's systematic attack against the Amhara people. So when it comes to our investigative reporting and what we're seeing from some Ethiopian media especially, the pattern of the attacks and the profiles are extremely alarming. Dr. Sen Knight alluded to some of these earlier. So regional security forces vacating from areas, and then the actual violent armed groups entering and then proceeding to perpetrate the massacres against innocent people. And time after time, what's being seen also is evidence of regional officials being complicit along with the security forces. So this is a very concerning matter. And earlier I mentioned the racist constitution, and this is actually one of the underpinnings that's enabled the violence, because these people are rendered essentially without any human rights, and they're actually considered second-class citizens in these regions, where many of them have actually been born and sometimes have been around for generations. So since the early 90s, there has been this system that has rendered these people without rights, and this has actually paved the way for the ethnic cleansing. But this is only one of very many factors. So, for example, if we look at the situation in the north with the TPLF attacking, we can attribute that much of the time to indoctrination, intense propaganda from hate speech medias. And this has also been a very major theme and pattern, which has been seen across many different scenarios, across waves of violence in the Oromia region over 2020 and 2019, when people were massacred in very large waves, partly incited by hate speech from media such as the Oromo Media Network, or OMN, and the Tigray Media House. So there's lots of factors that sort of play into this. And then just in the last few months alone, we've seen very disturbing large-scale massacres in the northern Amhara region perpetrated by the TPLF forces. And people have literally been abandoned by security forces in some instances and have been targeted by this violent armed group. And we've seen a campaign of systematic destruction of towns, entire towns. And this has actually been a theme even before the war. There was an entire town called Ataye in the southern part of the Amhara region that was essentially obliterated. The entire town was obliterated by militias of the OLA. And this actually didn't even gain much media coverage, if any at all, which was very, very disturbing because hundreds were killed. And, you know, the town was destroyed, looted, burned. And then now the TPLF is also doing something similar in the north with many different towns. There were reports of, distribution of lethal injections to villagers, extrajudicial killings, gang rapes. And essentially this has led to a humanitarian disaster. And unfortunately, we don't believe that the Amhara victims of these attacks have been allowed enough attention in the international media and by human rights organizations. So I have more to say, but maybe I'll just leave it there for now.
Yes, thanks a lot, Robel. Yes, of course, we will come back to that. And I can see that you're also supporting more or less what Jeff already said when it comes to the media and how they behave. Let's bring in our fifth panelist here. It's Tedia Meliaku. You're an author, philosopher, and humanitarian activist, a graduate of the University of North Texas, and you're also representative of the Ethiopian Royal Congress, which is an association that is very much into preserving the history and the culture of Ethiopia. And your main aspect is why is this ethnic targeting happening in the first place? So I would like to address you as well. Welcome to you here. And yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your topic and why do we talk about ethnic conflicts at all?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'll try to use my time very efficiently. So why is there ethnic targeting in Ethiopia? Systemic ethnic cleansing, ethnic engineering, and genocidal attacks have been Ethiopians' existential reality ever since the imposition of ethnic federalism, or Zenawism, as a political arrangement by the TPLF, and following the advent of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his arrival to power. Unfortunately, the systemic ethnic cleansing and deliberate massacres targeting ethnic Amhars in multiple regions have only deepened and escalated due to the preservation of the ethnic system. Amharas who sacrificed their entire existence to the preservation of Ethiopia, her unity and sovereignty, and her values were accused of being dominant throughout history, and the identity politics of the 20th century of the oppressor and the oppressed, and violent rhetoric of ridding the Amhara of Ethiopia to attain liberation rendered today's impoverished ethnic Amharas victims of ethnic persecution, deliberate massacres, systemic poverty, genocide, and mass displacements. Despite this immense and devastating eruption of crimes, the regime had not been taking any substantive or protective actions in favor of the Amhara people's survival. As known to the world, Ethiopia has now been the global leader for internally displaced persons. Close to 3 million people were displaced due to violent conflicts, according to results from the Global Report in 2019. And part of these displacements, mainly caused by ethnic politics based on the former EPRDF's policies, are linked to violent attacks on ethnic Amharas and the Orthodox Church. Even the Orthodox Church is viewed by the culprits as belonging to an unwelcome ethnic identity Amharas in certain regions, and the rabid gesticulation criminal onslaught to cleanse various ethno-states from what they consider Habesha or Abyssinian ethnic identity is and has been endangering the very continuance of Ethiopia as a coalesced state. The ethnic states referred to as regions were created less than 30 years ago when the EPRDF changed Ethiopia's constitution and introduced ethnic federalism nationwide, dividing Ethiopia's vast territory into semi-autonomous ethnic unitary states, except the Amhara region, which they internally divided into ethnic zones on the basis of language and ethnicity. But prior to the PRDF's ascendancy, Ethiopia had a federal-like provincial system, namely during the years of the monarchy, but not on the basis of ethnic identity at all. All Ethiopians, despite having different languages and cultures, had the legal right, according to Menelik II and Haile Selassie I's constitutions, both of whom abolished slavery, at least by law, to live and prosper wherever they wished within the Ethiopian borders, regardless of their ethnic background or mother tongue. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Church played an important role in promoting cohesion and unity, teaching equality among humans, and spreading her indigenous knowledge and teachings throughout the country. Amharic served as Ethiopia's official language for the past 800 years, since the times of Lalibela and Yukuno Amlak, and because the vast majority of Ethiopians speak and understand it, is served to strengthen political cohesion and mutual intelligibility of ethnic and tribal differences. But the narrative of the organized attackers and genociders who target the Amhara is the promulgation of Amharas as colonizers who forcibly impose their language, religion, and values on others. They also fabricate false facts such as that others' languages were banned, but have no ability to substantiate their claims that they use to fuel ethnic cleansing and violent crimes. The other psychological reason is anti-Abyssinian sentiment and the erasure of Ethiopia's historical identity. The ethnic extremists currently in power in Ethiopia who are committing ethnic cleansing and genocide on the Habesha Amhara people have bitter and profound hate for Abyssinian or Habesha history, civilization, and identity as a whole. TPLF's Tigran extremists falsely view Amharas as usurpers who want to claim the entirety of Ethiopia's history, but they themselves claim the entirety of Ethiopia's history to themselves, and hence have bitter hate for Amharas, whom they view as historical foes. The OLF-affiliated Oromo extremists who are now allied with the TPLF view Amharas as invaders that must be violently expelled from all lands that they claim and inhabit. But their main purpose is to efface and impede the continuation of Amhara's contribution to Ethiopia's historical civilization by committing genocide on Abyssinian Amharas, invading historical Abyssinian lands, and destroying anything that reflects the values and glory of Abyssinian identity. In conclusion, humanity has failed the Amhara people. Ethnic cleansing, mass displacements, invasions, and genocidal crimes committed against the Amhara people in Ethiopia do not seem to be the concern of international institutes and media powers whatsoever. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tedia, also for this very important insight. Thanks a lot. I'm not sure whether we're now connected to Meaza Mohamed, who is also supposed to speak here, but I was not quite sure whether she's available or not. I look at our technician, obviously not. Then we would continue here from the panel. And in that case, Tamar, I would like to address you once again and continue with that topic, ethnic targeting, that we're just talking about. And I know in the upfront to the conference, you were telling me something. You said that now even people, young people in Addis Ababa, the capital, they are not so much into this ethnic thing anymore. They do not define their identity only by their ethnical origin, but now they're sort of forced to give their ethnical identity. Could you just explain a little bit to us what is going on and why this can be dangerous?
Thank you, Monica. I will explain that. But before that, I would like to say something about my topic. My topic was impunity and human rights violation in Ethiopia.
Could we just maybe just say one word to this with regard to this, because we just had it as an aspect, and then you get back to your topic, so that we maybe can just pick up what Tedia told us.
Okay. In fact, that is the case, because Addis Ababa is really a very mixed population. and there are now 5 to 6 million. And it is very, very customary. It has been very customary not to talk about your which ethnic group you are belonging to. It was really superfluous, and there has been very, very mixture of this mixture of this ethnical group. Sorry. So now after 91, people has to identify themselves forcibly. So, for example, I can say in my family, my sister married an Oromo, and they have now 5 or 6 children. So they are living in Addis, and just by chance, they didn't learn the Oromifa. So now they have to identify themselves either to Amhara or to Oromo. And that is something which is beyond the reality. And that is something which you cannot solve in the way we are going now. And I will, when I just briefly say something about my topic, we will try always in our initiative now for a discussion to propose something, what we could do, because there should be a way out. And that is what we should do. So if I answered your question, I hope.
More or less, yeah, maybe just, I mean, it seems to be dangerous if you sort of inflicting this ethnical identity again and you impose it on people. Maybe do you think you can create hatred amongst people who didn't even think about their ethnical differences anymore?
Well, that is exactly what in my topic. What is the primary cause of this, of all this?
Yep. Yeah, we would like to hear about that.
The primary cause is the Constitution, which was adopted in 1994, and specifically the regional constitutions. Now I am talking about the primary cause of this impunity and this ethnic difference. So, for example, if I take the Oromia Constitution, there it says in Chapter 2, Article 8, and it states sovereign power in the regional state of Oromia resides in the people of the Oromo nation. That means the basic rights of the ethnic minorities in Oromia is not kept, and the basic right deprived, they are the second citizen. And that is the problem. Still, there are other examples. Part 2 of human rights in Article 15 of the Oromia Constitution again, they talk about right to life, liberty, and the security of the person. It says everyone as a person has an inviolable and inalienable right to life, liberty, and security. But as we see, this article has been broken a million times towards Amharas. And Amharas are living there, 10 million Amhara at least in Oromia. So this is what I mean, and this is what we understand slowly, what impunity means. This is a perfect example. And another example, I would like to take from another region so that you understand how deep and how bad these constitutions are splitting Ethiopian and the Ethiopian society. And that is from Benishangul Gums. And in this regional constitution was also made in 1994. There are 6 ethnic groups there living in this region. Amhara, something 25%, Berta, another 21%, Gums or Gumuz, 20%, Oromo 13%, Shinasha 7%, and Agau 4.2%. And this data, I got it from Central Statistic Agency based on the census in 2007. So in this region, all the massacre of Amharas has become uncountable. It has been almost on a daily basis. So why? The 25% Amharas in Benishangul, they are not at all, they are excluded from all state entities. That means they don't have any representative in the regional parliament. They are not participating in the police, and so on and so on. So if you are completely out of these entities, then it is impossible to defend oneself. And that is the problem. The 25%, the others are, it is what 4 of them are the owner of the land, so to say. So a different example that is very important is the Amhara Regional Constitution from 1994 to 1995. And that is also was made by TPLF-OLF. But here, there are different ethnic groups in Amhara region. However, each and every ethnic groups, they have the autonomy, the self-government, and they participate also in the regional parliament. So the question is, how on earth can be such kind of constellation when it comes to in other regions like Oromia and so on? So one has to ask himself, why is this possible? So we can discuss about it. So having said that, I could tell you some more, but I would just mention the solution, or what could we do. Just taking some examples. For example, we will have, at least the new government is proposing or planning to have upcoming dialogue. So do you think that this dialogue will create a sustainable peace in Ethiopia? We say no, because the basis is already apartheid based. So you can make a dialogue on this basis, but in the final analysis, who will win is those who are governing with this constitution. And almost all of the governing bodies, they don't change, they will not change this constitution. So we will say, before we start a dialogue, we have to get rid of all these regional, the articles in the regional constitutions. And then, so that we can have, again, a sustainable peace in the country, we propose and we urge that a truth and justice commission must be established independent of the political entities, so that the truth comes out, the public knows it, discuss about it. Those who are liable, they have to be punished, they have to be, they have to go to court. And this is our proposal. The dialogue, we are completely certain that it will not solve the plight of the Amharas.
So but are you saying that you're against the dialogue?
No, not at all. In principle, we are. In the final analysis, even if we want to change the constitution, we have to have a dialogue under normal circumstances. That means after these things, because the basic thing is done then for all ethnic groups the same. But now in Oromia, in Walaga, 40, 50 people are being killed on a daily basis now. And when we talk about dialogue now, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because the constitution, even if we agree on these dialogues, then before these articles are get rid of, then we cannot do anything. It will be the same, and the plight will continue.
Even though I can imagine that changing the constitution will not be such an easy thing, and it will not be done from day to the other, and you would need a dialogue in order to agree upon changing the constitution, isn't it?
Well, if the dialogue is about changing the constitution and about stopping the plight of the Amharas, of course, that is, I mean, in the first place, this idea is not there. The government and the governing party, they want to discuss about perhaps sharing of power, minimal power, and they have started it, but that is not the solution. And that is what I meant. Of course, if discussing about the constitution is very, very important, and that is the right direction, of course.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, because I cannot see the other panelists for the moment. So I don't know if there's any one of you who would like to directly react to what Tamar just said. Very, very briefly, just a remark, whether you agree with him that this would be a first action to take, since we wanted to take about actions, as Jeff also said earlier on. Is there one of you who would like to just react to this remark, this comment, that this is the way forward? Senait, would you like to say something about that?
Just very quickly, it is true. It is fact that people are literally dying every second. That people are sending out voice messages, help us, please. So the first thing to do, of course, is to stop the killings. There has to be an emergency action, some sort of directive, because you cannot really sit down and involve in dialogue while people are literally dying every second, because it seems that killings are part of making these people as bargaining chip. Now, the different armed forces that have been allowed to be extremely armed across the country, it is as though it's so much easier to kill civilians rather than to fight with government forces, with the caveat that even some government structures we've known that have been infiltrated. So to sit on a dialogue while these people are being used as a bargaining chip, as some kind of objects to show you powers on, then dialogues are always a welcome thing, but there needs to be a responsibility to protect. The monopoly of violence lies with the government. The killings need to stop, and if they can't do it, they have to ask. That's the whole reason why we are in this international alliance. That's why we have allied countries. So if you can't do it, you have to ask for help. Otherwise, the responsibility to protect lies with the government. At least ensure that people can breathe and not killed just for their identity. Then, of course, we need a proper pathway, have all forces on the table, and then chart the way forward, including an inclusive national dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't know if our other two panelists also would like react on that. If that's not the case, then I would like to bring out
Robert,
I can comment briefly.
Maybe you can wave your hand or something so that I can see that I know that you want to say something.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything that Dr. Sinait raised. In addition, I would like to say that I think the issue is not whether people are willing to engage in dialogue, it's whether there are necessary conditions that can make way for a fair dialogue. For instance, when you have a bunch of good-willed political actors, it's one thing that are willing to genuinely advocate for the rights of certain groups, but it's different when you have violent armed groups that are supposedly going to come to the table and essentially gain impunity for past crimes. So groups such as the TPLF and the OLF have long histories of terrorist attacks. So this has been documented. You can go on to resources such as the Global Terrorism Database. And then even now, international media have covered some of their atrocities in real time. And to put those at the same table as other genuine politicians, I think would be a betrayal of justice. So really, there needs to be conditions for essentially exclusion of violent armed groups, and rather putting in a criteria that can put in only the good-willed actors. So there's lots to say about this topic, but for example, even the lack of some opposition figures due to intimidation, arbitrary jailings, executions have been a very major problem. For example, there was former journalist and chairman of Balderas for True Democracy, Chairman Iskandar Nega, who was jailed along with other Balderas officials earlier in 2020, arbitrarily just as political prisoners. So when you have a condition like that, not only is it difficult to have a fair and free election, but it's almost impossible to have a dialogue. And then to seat them at the same table as, the likes of TPLF would be, tantamount to gaslighting Amharas and the rest of Ethiopia. Thank you.
Jeff, you also want to hop in on that topic? Your mic is off now.
Yeah, well, every time I try to speak, that thing goes off because it's also muted at your end. I want to echo that. The thing is, there is no equivalency here. You're dealing with a terrorist group, and I never got to finish the comments which I wished to make earlier, which the fact of the matter is before you even sit down to talk about things like the Constitution, which are urgent, you have to have an actual analysis of the real facts in front of you. And those are being obfuscated by an organized campaign to gaslight the West. So you're not going to have a proper conversation until you agree on those facts. How can you? If you're going to have one side lie about the entire history of the country, if you're going to have one side in a conflict started by a terrorist organization, lie about even when the conflict started and who started it, if you're going to have a side that has willing allies and sympathizers within the Western media and even the UN, lie about the facts and keep them from the public, you can't have a fair dialogue. You can't have any kind of dialogue. You're just going to have this go on and on. So first, as I said before, because I didn't get to finish, you have to have direct action to take the table legs, which is one, you have a journalistic enterprises in Ethiopia, which are trying actively to undermine the government now, which are putting out disinformation. You have the UN actively looking the other way in terms of war crimes going on, in terms of child soldiers. They know this is happening. We have multiple cases and photos of it happening. We have journalists who have actually interviewed child soldiers, Amhara children used as human shields, who are now IDPs, have been interviewed. Where's Western media on that? So before you can even have a dialogue, you have to have those facts, and there has to be some action taken. There's some jackass who is commenting on this event and took issue over the fact that I pointed out how many white Caucasian journalists are covering Africa, and then said, "You're white yourself." Yeah, and you know why? Because two diaspora groups sent me over there because they said they won't listen to us. And how are you going to have a fair dialogue if one side isn't being properly listened to? So yes, you have to have the facts laid out. You have to have dialogue with the people who actually represent with the individuals who actually represent the people, not a terrorist group which doesn't mind going into IDP camps and forcibly recruiting the people for their battles and taking children and putting them out there.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Talking about dialogue, I would like to use this opportunity to look here at our audience in Brussels, whether you have a question. There is already a first question. There are 3 questions now. I will call you to give you the floor in a second. Just wanted to make one remark to those of you who are following us online. You, of course, you also have the chance to ask us questions. I can see that some of you already made a lot of comments in the chat. You also put some sources there, which is quite helpful. For those of you who really want to make a comment and a question, then please, I recommend that you use this function on Zoom, that you raise your hand so that we can see that you really want to say something. And then we can also give you the floor in such a way that you can even be seen and heard here on the screen, so that we really get into a dialogue with you, even if you're not present here in Brussels. So having said that, and for the moment, we do not have any questions from our online audience. So I would like to start here with you. I also would like to ask all of you, please come to the mic here, because then we can also record what you say. We can see and hear you. And if you also would like to introduce yourself, thank you.
Hello, my name is Andy Vermout. I'm from the International Alliance for the Defense of Rights and Freedom. We are an organization with consultative status with the United Nations on human rights issues. And next to that, I'm also president of Post Versa. It's also an organization in Belgium. So I really wanted to thank this man of the panel, because he seems for me like a sort of Nelson Mandela for Ethiopia, because he is talking about institutional solutions, a constitution where everyone should agree is always better than war. That's what I think. So we should also honor today the great example of Asaminiwe Tsige, a symbol of the Amhara people in the capital of Bahir Dar. With Post Versa and the International Alliance for the Defense of Rights and Freedoms, we honor this remembrance. He was a true defender of the Amhara people. We, with the international community, should honor all the Amhara people and their defense, their just struggle. And I agree with Robel Alemu. Where was the international community when the hundreds of Amhara people were killed in Atay? It was not heard by the international community. When will the widespread ethnic-based persecution and genocide against the suffering Amhara people end? The international community should never forget this. We should all remember the greatness of this emperor, Theodros II. Historically, Western and Southern Tigray was Amhara territory before. The international community should respect this historical truths in this region and end immediately the TPLF terrorism momentum of war. The international community should not neglect the will of the people. The people have spoken in the last elections. We should not accept the Amhara genocide and the unorganized ethnic cleansing of the Amhara people. And I want to ask to all the people who are busy with human rights in Brussels, in Europe, and within the United Nations, to hear the voice of the Amhara people, who are not a minority. They are the second biggest group in Ethiopia. We should never neglect their voice. That's what I'm asking today.
Okay, thanks a lot. So now we had a question here from you, and then after we come to you, Wolfgang. And then we bring in questions from our online audience as well.
Yeah,
Please.
My name is Martin Cohn and I'm working for a law firm. And I have only a very brief question. As far as I understood, there was a constitution, a federal constitution, which was changed. And then you got a federal constitution based on ethnicity. And could you explain a little bit why the constitution was changed? What were the objectives? And if this new constitution doesn't work, so was the former constitution, was it working well, or people were happy? And who changed it? Why? Was it better with the old constitution? Normally, we change constitutions to have better living conditions for all the people. And so probably a certain time it worked more or less well. But what really happened? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think question well understood. Sorry.
Can I take a stab at that, Monica?
Please.
Sorry, now I'm getting one after the
Please.
other. First, we would like
Jump in
to,
and
I would
do
like
it.
to first collect the questions that you're having, and then we go for an answering round, because otherwise it's getting a bit too confusing and people are in a row for questions. Wolfgang, you only want to answer to that question, or you want to have your own question? Sorry? Yeah, well then, of course, I mean, it was your turn anyhow, so please.
My name is Wolfgang Pape. I'm here as a European, as a lawyer, by the way, as well. And that's why I'm linking to your question as well. I have a problem with the constitutional system you are explaining, because you talked about regional constitution. Never really is there a federal constitution that should be kind of in a hierarchy of law on top of it.
Oh my God.
And how do they link up these constitutions? And you mentioned even with the region, if I understand that correctly, the Romea, that there is some kind of a nation sovereignty. You talked about sovereignty at regional level. That for me as a lawyer is difficult to understand. So what is the hierarchy of law in Ethiopia at the moment, and what would you propose to improve there?
Okay, thanks a lot. We can see that this is a really an important topic. We had two people, you said, from the online community that raised their hands. So I don't know who is that. If you can bring them in, you can put on your camera, and then you can also introduce yourself to us, and we can really talk to you directly. I'm looking to Leo, our technician. Is that possible? So who is the first person? Because I don't see anyone popping up here. Okay, otherwise we postpone it, and we go ahead with that very important question concerning the constitution. Senat, I think we should first give the floor to Nelson here, our Nelson Mandela, and to answer that question, and then you can of course also add your comment, please. Yeah, well, now we bring you in later. So please first, and we go now for an answering round to that constitutional question.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for this compliment, but it is a big too big. But anyway, thank you very much. I will start with trying to answer the second question. The hierarchy of the constitution. There is a federal constitution, and there are regional constitutions. Normally, it says in the federal institution that articles in the regional constitution should not contradict with the federal constitution. Yeah, but it happens. What I talked about was about the regional constitution, which the 9 regions have. Now 10, tomorrow there will be 11. So the regional constitution was also done in 1994 after the Derg, or the military government, was deposed. And with that, the old constitution was also thrown away and I come now to your question. So it was not asked, it was of course for those who won the war, TPLF and OLF, Tigray People's Liberation Front and Oromo Liberation Front, they were the winner against the military government of the time. And that was in 1991. And
yeah, and I think there was also the question more related to why was it changed and what went wrong with the previous constitution, and why was there a need to change it?
yes, that there was no any reason. The one who won the war and deposed the military government formed its own constitution, and that was 1994.
Okay, so Senat, I think you also wanted to add something to that.
Yes, very quickly, I agree about the discrepancy between original constitutions, and like the gentleman earlier said, Mr. Wolfgang, it doesn't make sense legally to have the constituents of a nation, have mandates over the federal constitution. One thing that we have to actually take note is when the civil war, the bloody civil war ended after 17 years, the military dictatorship was replaced by two major groups. This is the TPLF had its own coalition, the EPRDF that had, puppet parties that were supposed to represent some of the main groups in the country, which still doesn't include the Amhara group at the time. And the Oromo Liberation Front came into Addis at the end of the war. They came in at the back of the mechanized forces of the EPLF, or the Eritrean Liberation Army. And then because that there were a lot of losses, they did not have the confidence to take over all the lands that they're planning to annex now. So what happened was put a plan in place where the country is divided ethnically, and ethnic administrative units are imposed, which does not translate on the ground actually. So when this has been imposed, literally a number of puppet parties were taking part. Amharas completely excluded from the process, not just only Amharas, people like the Gurages, the Gamos, who only not live in a localized areas, but all over the country, because these people being, taking part in the process would not agree to ethnolinguistic regionalized areas. So the constitution was imposed by these separatist groups. And when they were imposed, people were sick and tired of a civil war. They were just happy that the war has ended, and it crept up on them. When the regional boundaries, the regional regional boundaries were instituted and the regions were named, they were named by numbers. The majority of Ethiopians didn't know what they were going into. Tigray region was region 1. Afar region was region 2. Amhara was 3, Oromia is 4. There were 14 regions, including Addis Ababa, which was its own region. But because they had a master plan to slowly balkanize the country, and for that to happen, the regions had to have a maximum mandate, even over the federal state. Not many people know this. Almost all regions assign the regional land to just 1 or 2 groups. And then leaving out all the other ethnic identities living in that room, except the Amhara region. You can see how it's projected to leave the Amharas landless, because the Amhara regional constitution doesn't say it belongs to Amhara. Even if the region says Amhara, it says it belongs to the residents. Not unlike the Oromo region, unlike the Tigray region, unlike the Afar region or the Somali region. So this shows you that there is a master plan in place to completely balkanize the country. When, in terms of, for the lawyer who's been asking, for the legal context, for example, the commander-in-chief cannot even send in. So the defense officials can actually go to any region without permission as individuals, but forces cannot be deployed by the central government to any region if the region doesn't allow it. So this shows you, it says ethnic federalism, but actually it's ethnic confederalism. If you really think about it, it's just in names. So the more and more autonomous these regions get, the more and more the legally unrepresented people can legally and systematically be killed because they don't have representative in those regions. So this is why we're saying that the system itself is genocidal. To be honest, for us, it boggles our mind for nations, big Western nations and other nations, to be actually bogged down about internal boundaries rather than as allies to a country, an ancient country that has been allies, since and before even Second World War. Why not ask what is the root cause of their problem? Because we're all humans, Tigrayans, Oromos, Amharas, we don't want to go out and kill each other. The system imposed on us by few narrow ethno-nationalist groups is making this happen, and we cannot help it as people because the system pits us one against the other. And now when they say national dialogue, there are two extremes. One that wants citizens to live safely and happily all over Ethiopia. And there is another extreme that wants, no, we're still oppressed. We want more confederalized states. So it's a huge breadth of problem, and part of it is actually in the definition. It's not actually what it seems. The regions are more autonomous than they seem to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinat.
And just very quickly, Monica, to quickly comment, the reason why the earlier constitution doesn't work, the whole plan was to balkanize the country. The earlier government, it was a dictator. Like, it didn't look into any whatever, even if we had an amazing constitution, the military socialist government wouldn't have followed any law. It was a summary executions. It was a communist dictator government. So the constitution at that point was literally irrelevant because nothing was done legally. It was a dictator government. So that plays into it. It wasn't really actually, the constitution wasn't actually reviewed and amended. It was thrown out, and this balkanizing constitution was imposed at 91. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And you
could I please also
react to that, or no? I'm looking at Robel and Tedla, if you want to add anything to that, and also briefly comment on that. But also please try to be a bit more brief in your answers, also so that we have more chances to pick up following questions. So Tedla, Robel, who wants to start?
Sure.
Robel, maybe? Tedla, yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So quickly, there was a question as to why the constitution was changed initially. And it's very important to understand the context and the mentality that drove the momentum and also the change. So prior to the current constitution, and with the ethnic federalist so-called political arrangement, if we go back to the 20th century with the last emperor during the time of the monarchy, and even prior, what we had was a constitution that had a provincial system where Ethiopia was divided along provinces, 14 provinces that each had their own kings, for example, or princes who ruled those provinces. And the rulers of those provinces were from the people that inhabited those provinces. So it was the closest thing to a political federal system that you could have. And under that constitution, the constitution was not ethnic whatsoever. But unfortunately, in the 60s and 70s, there were movements who were backed both by internal and external powers that had this worldview of Ethiopia being a prison of nations and nationalities. And obviously, the blame was upon the Amharas, who they viewed as dominant, or the dominant group throughout history. And that's why I mentioned that earlier. And as a solution for that, even the TPLF wrote its manifesto in the 70s, accusing the Amharas of being imperialists, and also targeting Amharas and declaring Amharas as enemies of nations and nationalities. And that's where the mentality comes from. And it's not just the TPLF, also other liberation fronts were also mentally allied with this kind of politics or ethnic politics. And that's what evolved into ethnic federalism later. When the TPLF came to power, the previous constitution that they viewed as being unitarist was thrown out. But ironically, it was not an ethnic unitarist constitution at all. What it was political unitarist constitution, but with a federal-like system of governance with the provinces, with the 14 provinces. But later what they did was they effaced and got rid of the provinces and replaced them with ethnic states. So they created semi or nearly autonomous ethnic states with the intention to reduce Amharas who were spread out throughout the country into minorities. So, and how do they achieve that? By ethnically targeting Amharas, by making that they don't have any political representation in those ethnic states, and declaring those ethnic territories that they themselves arbitrarily created as the historical territories of these ethnic groups that were assigned to those ethnic states. So as a result, Amharas no longer had political representation, and they were targeted in all these new or newly created ethnic states, and they became stateless, basically. And those, and as a result, they were being told to go back to where they came from, and that the land was no longer theirs. So this is why I call the current constitution a form of constitutional ethnic engineering. That's what occurred. And this is, in my understanding, a phenomenal crime against humanity that has been completely disregarded and presented to the West as a form of multiculturalism. But it's not multiculturalism at all. It's actually some ethnic form of apartheid that intends to reduce Amharas from what it, in its own imagination, views as a dominant group in history. And in order to be liberated ethnically from Ethiopia, they're cutting Ethiopia into massive ethnic states and then ridding Amharas of those areas by cleansing them ethnically. So this is what's going on. This is what's been happening ever since the advent of the current constitution. And this is also what's being completely disregarded. And it's also the source of the identity politics, I would say, in the 20th century, is the source of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Tedia, for a very clear explanation. I think we all appreciated that here. Robert, you would like to add something to that?
Sure. So I think Dr. Senait and Tedia touched on the subject in great detail, so there's not much left for me to add. However, I would like to say the regional charters, I think, had fundamental flaws, especially in places like Oromia and Benishangul Gumuz, where there was an arbitrary designation of which groups were considered indigenous and which ones were considered, they're actually labeled as settlers. So it was almost as if they created this dichotomy of certain groups that belonged and didn't belong. And then in addition to this, this actually led to the regional governments actually perpetrated ethnic cleansing. And this was incentivized by this system. The system from its inception actually excluded Amharas from participating. And following that exclusion, this system deliberately targeted Amharas. So with the advent of the system, for example, earlier I mentioned how the Tigray region actually expanded its borders. So they actually occupied and actually annexed territories from the neighboring Amhara, historic Amhara provinces of Gondar and Wadlo. This was done under the pretense of ethnolinguistic designation. So they said, okay, the people in these districts of these former provinces can speak the language of the Tigrayan people, but those people actually were not consulted in this process. So these were people who were actually multilingual. They could actually speak Amharic, the Tigrayan language, Arabic, and this was because, for example, in the case of Welkait, it was bordering Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan. So this was actually for economic purposes. So they conflated speaking a certain language with ethnic identity, which is a very gross oversimplification, because as we know, identity is much more complex than that. And as Mr. Tamar had mentioned, there are many, many cases of intermixing, because as you know, naturally a country with this many ethnicities, you have people, you have cultural exchange, you have migrations. So this is a very, very intermixed sort of mosaic of peoples and cultures, which was very diverse. But when one can argue that this system, rather than celebrating diversity, actually did the opposite and created more division. So you have 80 plus ethnic groups in this country with less than a dozen ethnic regions. So then you have to ask yourself, how can a system account for the other, 70 or so ethnic groups? And in short, it doesn't most of the time. In fact, much of the time, new inter-ethnic clashes and rivalries and competition for resources fueled further conflict. And this was very problematic. And for example, going back to the case of Welkait, after the TPLF actually occupied this territory, not only did they commit very, very intense and brutal ethnic cleansing and genocide of the inhabitants, but they seized their lands and then they resettled ethnic Tigrayans from central Tigray to take over the lands. And so this was how we can say that it incentivized essentially ethnic cleansing and land grabs. And the similar things happened in other places where there were shared territorial boundaries. So all in all, the system simply did not work. In the first place, it was implemented without consulting the Amhara people, which are the second largest group in the country. So naturally, you would say it doesn't make sense. How can you have a system where you've actually excluded one of the major groups? And some people would actually argue the Amhara are actually undercounted in the census. So in the lack of reliable census data, when some people actually say Amharas could be the largest group, we don't have the data to actually disprove that. There's actually evidence to support that claim. So there's much needed follow-up that's needed to sort of address these gaps. But all in all, I think the Ethiopian people are not opposed to democracy. As Lichtedla pointed out, this was something that was actually ingrained into the old system. But with that being said, there was lots of history, and then furthermore, to complicate that, lots of propaganda that has caused sort of certain ideologies to flourish that are based on alternative history and facts. And I think more is needed to touch on maybe the underrepresented perspectives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm again looking to Leo. Is there anyone in the online community wanting to be seen and heard here directly? Okay. If you have someone coming in, then we should also give them the opportunity. Is it possible, or?
Hello?
Only audio, but doesn't matter. Yeah, if we have someone.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Could you please tell us who you are? We cannot see you, but I think we can hear you. Can you tell us who you are and tell us your question, please?
Is it me, please? Can I confirm that?
Well, we don't. Well,
okay.
It's obviously it's you. Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So my name is Zerihun. I'm calling from Brussels in Belgium. So my question is really very broad for all of them, I think. We all Ethiopians know the suffering that Amhara people went through the last 30 years, let's say, in almost every region of the country except the region Amhara itself. I don't know. My question is, at this moment, is it really necessary to point out that Amhara is particularly targeted by the current conflict, because that is a burning issue at the moment. I'm saying this because the whole country is suffering because of the TPLF terrorist group, and in particular the two regions of Amhara and Afar. And is it not falling into the trap that TPLF itself created by classifying us into Amhara, Afar, Oromo, and so on? Now you guys are coming here advocating just the Amhara problem. I can see where you come from, but is it timely? Are you not falling into the trap that TPLF created to divide us and everybody is standing for its own ethnic group while the country is facing existential threat at the moment? That's my question.
Thank you very much. I think the question is well understood. So I think, Senat, you can't wait to answer it. But again, please, now to all the panelists, please, also with regard to the time, please make sure that you come up with brief answers so that everybody can contribute. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very quickly, I agree with the speaker that the whole nation is gripped in crisis, and that has been in the making for some years now, because this is the end product of having a country being under an ethnic system. But the biggest trap is to always wait as people are horrifically dying, not by bullets, by machetes, by axes, horrifically, children being killed. And what makes it a trap is that OLA now is officially allied with TPLF. So not only that, this is the usual ethnic cleansing to make the independent republics happen, or to kind of grip, have some kind of power over the central government, whatever the reason is. But right now, it should be out there openly. If they officially are allied with TPLF, why not try and cause another suffering on the other side of the country, so that people are confused, people are dying everywhere, and then the forces are divided. So there's no way that this will stop until TPLF is actually defeated, if this is one of the strategies of TPLF plus OLA itself. So for whatever reason, to ignore such suffering is to actually fasten the downfall of our nation. Because the number one, it's not the fact that it's Amhara. Actually, it just, Welaga and Benishangul continued with this ethnic cleansing and genocidal attacks. But it is actually, when this happens in the southern regions and in the southern cities of Oromia, actually it's Gurages, it's Gamos, it's Walaitas, it's Kores, which are about to almost be extinct, by the way, in the Amago Warada by continuous attacks. And also in Omo area, the Mursi and the Bodi, which are also being extrajudicially killed. So the system is genocidal. And the reason we need to bring forward, I'll wrap up, is that there is also another question asked here online. Why do you think the international community seems to ally with TPLF? Because part of it is not because they're just in love with TPLF, but part of it is because they misunderstand the problem. We're not clear. We don't have clarity in this.
Again, Senat, please, could you please just come to end, because we're already running out of time, and it would be nice to answer briefly to the questions.
Okay, in a half a second. If that region, the whole of Horn of Africa is to be destabilized, it's not just because of the war in the north. There's a lot of conflicts and ethnic cleansing and a lot of horrific violations of gross human rights violations happening. So if as a whole, as Ethiopians, as Amharas, as Oromo, as Tigrayans, and as international committee do not look into the root cause, even if the war is somehow resolved, our problem will not end, human suffering will not end, and we will continue to be balkanized. So we have to face the problem and get everyone to act on it.
Okay, thank you. I can always see that we all were passionate about, of course, compassionate and emotional about the topic. But I was just thinking whether your answer, which was very relative, really really answered the question, because from what I understood, it was just a question whether you fall into a trap by having an event such like this addressing Amharic issues. Maybe going for events which address the problem more in general. So that's how I understood the question. So I would like to
that's right. That's a question, really, because this is a question for the problem they're talking about is a 30-year-old. Now that's really not about the case. Now Ethiopia, the whole Ethiopia is in trouble at the moment. And that's what I think we should talk about.
Yeah, I think the question is understood, and I also would like to ask the other panelists to answer directly to that. Of course, there's more to say about the whole conflict, but really to stick to the question. Robert, you raised your hand first, so please.
If maybe the Tedia can go first, if you would like.
Thank you.
You should just agree upon what you're doing.
Okay, I'll just be very quick, and thank you very much, Robel. I find this to be very redundant and nonchalant, personally, because the Amhara region has been invaded. That's for one. Second, the Amharas are being blamed for the war in Tigray, quote unquote, whereas the Amharas are the ones suffering from the massacre, like Maikadra, Chana, and all these different massacres. And the world, the West in particular, with all these big institutions and media powers, are pointing their fingers at the Amharas.
You're muted now, I think. We cannot hear you. Tedla, we cannot hear you, I'm sorry.
There's no particular targeting of Amharas in that, you know, it's the entire country that's suffering. Of course, the entire country is suffering, but the Amharas are targeted initially because the entire constitution that we have that's ethnically based targeted the Amharas. The TPLF targeted the Amharas in their manifesto initially and from the get-go. So to pretend that the Amharas are not at the center of all this problem and to pretend that we should not address this issue by name is nonchalant, and it's completely unreasonable, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Robel.
Thank you. I think what people sometimes miss is that this is only part of the larger problem. So if we were to extend this event, for example, by a few other hours, maybe we could, you know, get into some of the other issues facing other groups. It's not to exclude that plight, but it's just that there's a sense of urgency. At present, the Amhara region is literally under siege. Earlier, we talked about some of the atrocities that are being committed by the TPLF, and this is, you know, deliberately targeted towards Amharas. So that not only has the international media actually framed it as Amharas being, you know, perpetrators of violence, but the TPLF, there's, you know, documented evidence of them indoctrinating their fighters, even now, to specifically attack Amharas and commit a targeted genocide. So I think, you know, as people who are, you know, Ethiopians, who are proud Ethiopians, it makes sense naturally to side with the Amharas, as Amharas are Ethiopians. But what we shouldn't miss is we shouldn't fall into the trap of not telling the full story and hiding details to fulfill, you know, whatever perceived agenda or benefit there is. But at the end of the day, much of this, Amharas are bearing the brunt of a lot of these attacks. So it makes sense just to, you know, give attention to that and just, you know, come and support, you know, these Amhara Ethiopians. Thank you.
Thank you. Tamar, would you like to add briefly something to that?
Yes, I think the question raised shows to me that we Amharas started very late. And the person who is asking now why Amharas might have accustomed to what the others have been doing through the years. They were really organized as an Oromo, organized as Tigrays, and so on, and tried to defend themselves. But unfortunately, we are a bit late, but now we are very, very committed to really fight back in a sense that we try to defend ourselves. So the other question is, the Amharas are not the only people who are really attacked. Of course, the Afars are there, but if you look it very closely, Amharas are being attacked from TPLF through the invasion, and in Oromia, ethnic cleansing, and so on and so on. So in this, you know, it is so vast that we say it is very important that we defend ourselves, that the Amharas defend themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So I think it became clear why you do have a very good reason to be here today at the Brussels Press Club, and to, of course, discuss this, and that we also concentrate on the situation of the Amhara people today. Nevertheless, I would like to pick up on this and use that question just raised for our very last and final round, in which I would like to give all of you once again the floor to complete one sentence very briefly. So if we can imagine, if one day there would be a situation where we would have such an event here in Brussels or wherever, where not only people from Amhara people would sit on the panel, but you would sit with people from other ethnic groups together and start a dialogue and talk. Do you think that would be possible one day? So I would like to ask you for last round to complete the sentence. Yes, we can have such a dialogue one day, if maybe you can start by completing that sentence, Senaid.
Yes, of course, it's always important to have that dialogue. As you know, this is specifically important right now. And of course, the questions were, to come from every direction, but it was very important because of what was going on. And this was more of raising that awareness, but dialogue from all sides is always very important. And then I want to pose back a question. First
of all, I would like to know from you, what is the prerequisite for you to have such a dialogue one day, to concretely imagine to sit here together on a panel with people from those other groups that for the moment, unfortunately, you cannot talk with?
No prerequisite at all. This is not a government like national dialogue with actual, mandates being requested from the people. Being on a panel is really, there shouldn't be any prerequisite. We should all be freely coming and saying our sides, our truths, the truths, and also try and come to an understanding. Sometimes dialogues really could straighten out misunderstandings and send better message, and maybe tone down on the vile hate that's going on back home. Yeah.
Okay. Still, I would like to forward a question to Tedia, and really to ask you to finish that sentence. Could you imagine to have such an event with different people, different representative of different groups at the same panel and talking to each other one day? Which scenario would you imagine that would make that possible?
Sure, thank you very much. I personally don't really have any demands. I think that it's very important to spread this message. It's humanitarian, it's very important, it's urgent. And therefore, officials, important personages who have any level of influence, if we can be connected to them, if we can speak to them directly, that would be my pleasure. And I'm also very thankful for being part of this. And thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you. Robert, what would you like to add to that? Would that be a dream come true one day, to have such a event that talks about the situation of different groups?
Yes, most certainly. I think having dialogues is never a bad thing. We can exchange views, we can empathize with one another. Sometimes it can be humanizing in a context where vile hate speech and dehumanization are so prevalent. So I see it as being a very positive thing. And I think, most Amharas also have this kind of viewpoint. So, I think talking is the best way to get out of things, because at the end of the day, this is a country that already faces lots of economic challenges. People, aside from ethnic cleansing, also have to worry about survival. These are poor farmers much of the time who are bearing the brunt of this violence. And so even if they weren't targeted, life already isn't easy. So anything that we can do to mitigate any risks, I think would be a very positive step. And thank you for having me on this panel.
Thank you. Nelson, Tamaru, what is your very last word on this?
Well, naturally, we are always ready to talk, to have a dialogue with the different ethnic groups, because we were together, and we should be together under an equitable circumstances, because this superficial division of Ethiopia will not last long. I'm very sure of that.
Thank you very much. These are very, very nice and beautiful final words. With this, we have to close from here. And I thank all my panelists, of course, Tamar Robesha here with me in Brussels, and of course, all of you, Sinead, Robel, Tedia, and Jeff. We can't see you for the moment anymore, but for all your very valued and informative contributions, for a vivid debate, we say goodbye from here. And I'm pretty sure we will have more of those kind of discussions in the future to come. And yeah, please keep up the dialogue and let's help to make the world and Ethiopia a better place. Thank you.